Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to my podcast where I tell you about Nashville's great baseball history and traditions.
Shot to right, a one-hop liner.
Certainly about its past, especially about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, but also a little bit about its present and future too.
Yes, he can. It makes the waist-high catch.
And I introduce you to players, coaches, and other fans and their love for everything baseball.
The high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
For some time, I've been wanting to have Pete Weber on one of my podcast episodes, and there's several reasons why. We know him as a hockey announcer for the Nashville Predators and their radio play-by-play, but he's been a baseball announcer also. In fact, if you were listening to the beginning of this, you heard Pete's call of a couple of ball game situations, and I'm grateful to him. He helped me early on about episode production and speaking and diction and things like that. He and Claudia are a great pair, and we're grateful to have them in the community. So here's my conversation with Pete Weber. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for doing this. First of all, let me introduce you. My guest is Pete Weber. Pete Weber is the play-by-play voice of the Nashville Predators, the radio broadcast. And we always love listening to Pete. He's great for the Predators, and he's actually great for the city and the state of Tennessee. He's been a sportscaster of the year, and more than once, haven't you?
More than once. And it would be braggadocious if I were to tell you how many times.
That's okay. Let's start about with hockey, though. We got to start there, I think, because that's where you are now. But name the places that you have called hockey games for what teams?
Okay, so I've worked for the Los Angeles Kings, the Buffalo Sabres, and the Nashville Predators. And man, the years have gone by so quickly, and you really realize that when they celebrate the 25th opening night.
Oh, yeah.
Which, thanks to COVID, I wasn't able to be a part of
right
the other night, but I did have the season opening game in Tampa Bay, and I should be able to return within about a week or so. And I also did Rochester Americans hockey. So living in Buffalo, 60 miles away from Rochester, Buffalo was the parent team for the Rochester Americans. And whenever they would do TV for about 10 years' time, I did their radio on those games where guys would move. And then, so I had guys to work with like Mike Keenan, who was a fairly successful NHL coach, Joe Crozier, John Van Boxmeer, and people like that. As a matter of fact, one of the guys I backed up took the job in Rochester in 1986, and he's still there, Don Stevens, who was also the man who was in the booth for the then Phoenix Giants when I was doing the Albuquerque Dukes.
All right. Now, where did you start? Because I think you're from where in Illinois?
Galesburg, Illinois.
Galesburg, Illinois. Is that where you got your start in broadcasting?
Yes, it is. At WGIL radio there. And that was in 1972, the 73 academic year. I graduated early from Notre Dame. They needed a sports director at WGIL. So we made the deal on Thanksgiving that I would come back home and go to work there. And it was there where I got my first chance to do baseball because of a college friend of mine. His father ran WJOL radio in Joliet, Illinois, and they had a team in the Illinois playoffs. So they asked if I could leave WGIL for a day or so and go to Mine Field in Peoria and call the game for them. So that was my first ever baseball broadcast, and it was in 1973.
From there, did you also call other sports too, though, at that time?
Oh, at WGIL, it was loads of basketball, a load of basketball and high school football.
Right.
And those were truly fun times. And then as we moved along, I ultimately got involved with a doctor friend of the family who wanted to start a competing FM station. So I got myself fired for that. And then I took over coaching the Knox College Hockey Club in my hometown, and then ultimately went back up to Notre Dame and got my graduate degree in communications while I was doing Notre Dame hockey on the commercial radio station in town. And that's really where my hockey journey began.
When did you call your first baseball game?
So it would have been in May of 1973. And my first one where I was working for the club and not being on a lend-lease as I was for WJOL in Joliet, which, by the way, the home of Rudy, as we're celebrating Rudy Rudiger. That was in 73. And then I got my first baseball job in 1981 working for the Albuquerque Dukes. Please keep in mind, Dukes, not any of the modern names they're using now as a result of the changing of minor league baseball.
Pure baseball people know that was the Dukes, and probably would say it should be still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you get that job?
It was a Western New York connection from my years in Buffalo. Pat McKernan, who was also president of the Eastern Baseball League, was the managing partner for the Dukes. And I sent him a tape, and he remembered me from Buffalo. And that's pretty much how I got in there and took over. That was when David Glass left the Dukes to become one of the voices of the San Francisco Giants. So I was there for 1 year. Magnificent year. I should have brought my championship ring with me to show you on camera here. But the team was 93-38, hit 325 as a team. And even with the split format in the Pacific Coast League at the time, would have won the pennant by 22 and a half games, moved right on in the playoffs so that they swept through the Tacoma Tigers, which were then the Oakland A's farm club. They had Mitchell Page and so on that team. But I had a Triple Crown winner at first base, the first baseman Mike Marshall. I had a rookie in right field named Candy Maldonado. I had a rookie on the pitching staff, Alejandro Pena, who just blew people away. And then I had the only 20-game winner in professional baseball that year on our staff, Ted Power, because of the Major League strike in 81. And then he was the guy who ended up being the losing pitcher to Nolan Ryan in his record-breaking fifth no-hitter that fall.
Did you enjoy living in Albuquerque?
Yes, I did. Yeah, yes, I did. It's hard not to. The only complicating factor there would be the way the winds and the sand can be. Be careful how you park your car. It could be naturally sandblasted, and you'll need to go to Earl Scheib to get one of those 1995 paint jobs.
Was it Albuquerque years ago that had a drive-in car? You could drive your car in the outfield? I remember
yes,
that.
We had that.
Sometime.
And there was a sign the umpires would have for me to turn around, and they would just go this. And that was when I would say, folks on the air, hope they were listening, that please turn off your headlights. This is dangerous for the hitters.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Now, that was a Dodgers farm club?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who was the manager?
Manager was Del Crandall.
Oh,
one of the nicest men ever. And that set up some of the best dugout shows when we would play Salt Lake, and their touring pitching coach was coming in. So I would have Warren Spahn and Del Crandall talk about their days together with the Milwaukee Braves.
How neat. That's cool. So how long were you in Albuquerque?
Just the 1 year.
Yeah.
After that is when I came back and went back to Buffalo in the fall of 82.
And with the Bisons and also with the Sabres? Is
with the Bisons, the Sabres, the Bills, the college teams. I mean, have Mike will travel. Skip,
wow,
that's the way I lived.
That's the way you have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long were you in Buffalo? Until the Predators?
Two terms there, 76 to 78. And then in 78, I was lucky enough to get hired to do the color commentary for the Los Angeles Kings.
Yeah.
So moved out to the West Coast for that. And then after 3 seasons there, Chick Hearn was the guy who had hired me at the Forum to come in, and he helped me get the job as the play-by-play guy for the new regional sports network, taking care of the Seattle Supersonics in 81, 82.
Wow.
So, but that lasted just 1 year. That's when I went back to Buffalo and started building out my career.
Right. How are the winters in Buffalo?
My first only had 196 inches of snow. So that was a little severe, to be certain.
Well, you need ice on the rink, but you don't necessarily need it at the ballpark. How was the springs in Buffalo?
They were wonderful. As a matter of fact, our opening day in 1983 for the Eastern League Bisons, we had every possible bit of weather. We started with a beautiful sunshiny day, had rain that turned into snow, and with those difficult elements to contend with, finished out. I think the game was final 21-7, wow. And in the stadium where the Natural was filmed that summer of 1983. They didn't know yet when we started the year that they were going to be filming a classic baseball movie there at that point in time, but indeed they did, and what fun that turned out to be.
I'm sure. Did you have a part in that?
I wish that I had.
Yeah.
I wish I could tell you that I was used as the announcer, but it's more like they get a producer who was like a Bob Costas sound-alike. If you remember his words, "Goodbye, Mr. Baseball," and "Hello, Mr. Spaulding," and all that. Yeah. But no, I was an observer, including the climactic scene where the lights blew up, and that was filmed on a Saturday morning at about 5 a.m. And remember, the ballpark was in a neighborhood. Yeah. And so those fireworks going off at 5 a.m. on a Saturday were somewhat disruptive for the neighborhood.
Yeah. Tell me about that ballpark, at War Memorial Stadium, right?
Yes. It was, they were looking, the producers of the movie were looking for something as close as they could get to the old Polo Grounds. And they couldn't have come up with a better nomination than War Memorial. It wasn't exactly like the Polo Grounds because they didn't have the two short foul lines. They had just the one short foul line, and that was in right field, which for the movie's purposes was painted on the wall as 310. I pasted off. It was closer to 279 than it was to 310. Then it was a natural 340 to left field. Right. But the park had also been home for various professional football franchises. There have been a number of American football leagues, Skip, including one in the 40s, and then the All-America Football Conference, which had the Buffalo Bills, Cleveland Browns, San Francisco 49ers in it, and then moved roughly over to the NFL. But it was primarily a football ballpark. And I know I shouldn't say football ballpark, but that's really what it was. That's the way we played it. It was so much fun. And you were on top of the action. So as opposed to the Polo Grounds, where you see some of the pictures, even when they put them out today, it seemed like you were almost in another galaxy sometimes, looking out to center field. Not the case at War Memorial.
Wow. Was it built as a football stadium?
It was built primarily as a football stadium. It was one of FDR's WPA projects in the 1930s. So on WPA projects, they just keep pouring concrete until it fills the hole. Yeah. And so it took a heck of a long time when they began demolishing the stadium in 1989 to get it down all the way. As a matter of fact, I believe one of the demolition companies went bankrupt as they were going through the project.
Did it have a nickname? Did they call it something else?
The old Rock Pile.
Rock Pile, right. That stadium was there until they built the one which became, was it Pilot Field in the beginning?
It started out as Pilot Field.
Pilot Field.
Now it's Salem Field.
Salem Field. That's a nice ballpark. I've been in that ballpark.
It is, and they've kept it up. They've done various renovations over the years, and when I was back there again this last summer, more things popped up. But the I think critical part to that was when they realized that the Canadian government was not going to let baseball clubs cross the border to play the Blue Jays, since they are the parent club of the Bisons. The Blue Jays really heavily invested in Salem Field, LED lighting and everything, redid the clubhouses. Just a fantastic job they did there, and it's lovely to do.
The ballpark, they draw well too in Buffalo, don't they?
Yes, they still do.
Do they deserve a major league team? Is there any movement there? Have you heard anything lately about that?
Not lately, but I think we realize the economics make it almost impossible. They did build that park with expandability in mind, and they set it up so you could do that. The upper deck around the ballpark, which wraps around third to first and beyond, is built with support steel and all of the wiring and all the plumbing to support a second deck, which would make it look very similar to Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. But the economics of the game are such now that I don't know that Buffalo could support it.
Right. When I was a sales rep for New Era, New Era had a facility right there, and I guess the city had to buy that property from them, and that's where the ballpark, part of the ballpark, went in for urban renewal, I suppose, or whatever they call it.
So, it was also part of an area where some guy named Samuel Clemens, we know him better as Mark Twain, had lived. So his residence was swallowed up in that new park.
We do that, don't we? We tear things down and put something else up, and we do it pretty quickly, too.
Well, they had to make a quick decision there as well. The main trunk telephone lines connecting the U.S. and Canada ran through the ballpark field and essentially would go from first base out to left center field. So it was an $8 million project to relocate that behind the wall and keep the two countries connected.
Wow. Okay, so you've seen some great ball players come through Buffalo too then, right?
Oh, yeah. Moises Alou, without any question, right near the top. And then I got to tell you, a guy very smart ball player who was incredible in there, and that was Billy Ripken, who was the team shortstop in my last year doing the games there in '95. That was tremendous. But we also had people like not just Moises Alou, but Otis Nixon. He was in the last year at the old ballpark, and that was after he had been the shortstop for the Nashville Sounds at Greer Stadium. So quite a few of them. And I'm still on the board for the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame, and we're inducting them as time goes on into the team's Hall of Fame, which now has been going since 1985.
Were they a farm club for several teams during that time that you were there?
Yes. When I started there, it was the Pittsburgh Pirates, then became the Cleveland Indians, the Chicago White Sox. Back it came to Cleveland, and then Cleveland through 95, and then the Mets, followed by the Blue Jays.
They tore the old War Memorial Stadium down. Sorry, not the.
There are pieces of it still up.
Right.
2 gates are still up, and they have turned it into the Johnny B. Wiley Recreation Project. And there's a full baseball field there now. There is an all-weather track. There is a soccer field. Out of that huge stadium, they've come up with very many uses for the community. And I'm proud to say that they've done a great job with it.
Well, you mentioned the Nashville Sounds. I can't let you go too far without telling me about Charlie Mitchell in a special game that he had as a pitcher for the Nashville Sounds in a playoff game in Buffalo. Can you tell us about that?
I sure can. That was, it was a playoff game, so it was unscheduled. We went on the road at the end of the 1990 season, basically a huge tie with Nashville and Louisville. And so we go on the road for 9 and play our last games on that schedule in Toledo, as that was the 4-year overlap schedule, International League, American Association. And Buffalo had gotten back to AAA via the American Association, much as Larry Schmittou had gotten Nashville to AAA baseball by virtue of the purchase of the Evansville Triplets. Buffalo got it by purchasing the team from Wichita. And so here they go down the stretch. We are playing in Indianapolis on the last night of the year and getting the ticker tape results from the other games and seeing that all of a sudden could not rally in the 9th inning against the Indians. So we end up, and they're not the Guardians, they are the Indians, so that we had to go back to Buffalo, and they had made a draw that week before and found out that should a playoff be necessary, Buffalo would host it. So here it was on the night of Labor Day, and you don't sell tickets for something like that. School had started again. The tickets went on sale at 8:00 that morning. We hadn't even flown back home yet, and they sold over 16,000 seats for that game, and they all got a bonus. The thing went 18 innings to decide the Eastern Division Championship. And Charlie Mitchell, he was the very definition of long man in the bullpen. He got 7-8 innings out of that game. And he's told me afterwards, all he could think about was how hungry he was, because the Sounds had just had to travel to Buffalo for that. And there wasn't a lot of preparation for it. but Charlie ended up being the winning pitcher. And an X sound, Hugh Kemp, was the loser and the last batter in the game, as it turned out. I can't remember how many bases loaded situations Buffalo had as that game unfolded, and they couldn't finish things off.
I may be wrong, but as I've looked into some of Charlie's history, I think it was it may be three bases loaded situations that he pitched out of.
Yeah.
It's kind of an amazing game. He kind of can hang his hat on that one, can he?
Yes, he can. And every time we see each other, we tend to talk about that game at least a little bit.
Yeah, what a nice guy. He and his brother John are just as good as gold, and good family people too. So I appreciate you telling me that story. Okay, so you leave Buffalo for Nashville?
Yes.
But that didn't end your baseball broadcasting career, not totally.
No, not totally.
You had an opportunity to call games with the Sounds, right?
Yes, a lot of fun. When I first got here, Chuck Valencias was doing the Sounds games on radio, and I would join in with him. And then ultimately, I'll not forget, I just going over some files on my computer here the other day, and I found the files of all the guys. We were putting together a montage of people who had done the Sounds as preparing to leave Greer Stadium 6 years ago. And that was rather fantastic. So here's Bob Jameson. He's living in Middle Tennessee again now after all that time, and he's working as an accountant. And he said that's probably what he should have been anyway, because that was the way you did your stats. And man, that was, people think it's easy to leave an old ballpark. It's not. It has a grip on you. And when you remember all of that and the emotion that goes with it, it's really an emotional thing.
Name some other great broadcasters. I think of Chuck Morgan and what he's done with his career, but some others that maybe people would not be so familiar with. Who's in San Francisco? John Miller. Is it
John Miller, who, when I first met him, he was doing the Texas Rangers, and I met him because on the Texas Rangers was one of my boyhood buddies, Jimmy Sundberg, and so when they would come to Southern California, and I lived there, I would go down to Anaheim and get together with them at all times. And sometimes I would sit with John up in the Rangers broadcast booth. I'm just thinking of the guys who have been in the same league with me at the American Association. The backup broadcasters for the then Louisville Redbirds was a guy named Joe Buck, who was going to Indiana University at the time. So it was a short trip for him down to join Jim Kelch in the broadcast booth. And then after 2 years of Joe Buck, the next guy was Todd Callis, who moved in there. Thankfully, Jim Kelch later got a significant period of time with the Cincinnati Reds broadcast booth, working with Marty Brenneman, etc. Yeah, I got some good Marty Brenneman stories on Jim Kelch, but I'm not going to reveal them at this point in time.
Okay. Did you ever meet people like Mel Allen? Or, I mean, that predates you quite a bit, I know.
No. Mel I met because he was so close with people in Niagara Falls. As a matter of fact, I have an interview I did with Mel one day when they were celebrating the Niagara Falls Power Grid, when they were opening that up. And he was, by that point in time, that would have been like 1988, 89. So that's even after he had come back and called the Dave Righetti no-hitter on Yankees cable television. And of course, in Los Angeles, I met Vin Scully and Dick Enberg, and my partner with the Kings, Bob Miller, just retired after only 44 years in the job. So he's a piker compared to Scully. Scully did 67 years with the Dodgers, and Chick Hearn was the guy who was in charge of both of us at the Forum. Marty Glickman I ran into on a regular basis because of living in Buffalo, and then he was doing the New York Giants and then the New York Jets. So across all the sports, I've run into a few Hall of Famers.
You ever been to Cooperstown?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, there's some of me in Cooperstown. I gave them, I think, 30 gigabytes of old baseball audio and interviews with Hall of Famers.
Wow.
Several summers ago.
That's great. First time I went there, I went up to the library, and I didn't get to go in. I didn't have an appointment. But because we worked for New Era, we would fly into Buffalo a day or two early, and our guys and I would rent a van and drive down. And so one time they didn't want to go. So I went down early and I had run into Tim Wiles, who was the head
Yes.
librarian there, who's not there any longer.
Good Notre Dame grad.
Oh, yeah. I had a story about how I met him at a bar. It started with trivia. We weren't there to drink. We were there to talk trivia. And
Okay.
we kind of started talking about things. He was giving me history, and I couldn't stump him on anything, as you might expect a librarian at Cooperstown. But I went into the library and had the white gloves and everything and sat at a table and asked him if he could bring me any file or any information they had on Nashville baseball. And he brought me a file that it was as thin as it was when they took it out of the package. There were very few things in there. So I had sent some things later. It's a great trip. And the last time I went, I don't think will be my last trip there.
The same by me. And my first trip there was totally by accident. I was covering the Buffalo Bills at New England Patriots game and left early because O.J. Simpson got tossed out for getting into a fight with a Patriots linebacker. So just decided to stop off in the 2 hours that remained of the opening of the museum when we were coming back through Cooperstown.
I will put you on the spot one more time. Who's the best interview you ever had? I'm thinking baseball, but you can tell me any sport. That puts you on the spot, I know.
No, but I got to tell you, those interviews involving ex-teammates, Del Crandall and Warren Spahn, were really something. I just wanted to sit back and listen. Sure. I didn't want to interfere by throwing a question out. And I didn't need to, because both of them were highly intelligent men and had absolutely fantastic stories.
For fans, I think, to talk about their sport, baseball is king. I really do believe that. I think because we all knew how to play, or at least we thought we could play. We all could throw a ball or swing a bat out in the backyard. And I don't even know how to hold a hockey stick, but I think I can.
Well, I can show you that.
Well, it's just such a special sport to me, as you know, as we've had discussions, and I know you're in your hockey realm, and I'm not sure that baseball and opportunity will ever come. But I want to compliment you, whether you're calling us any sport, particularly hockey these days. I think, and I compare you to some of those guys that were calling games like Vin Scully did, because you don't throw a lot of, there's a lot of exit velocity and pitch counts and things these days that I know that they have to use those things because that's what the listeners, I guess, are interested in. But I think that you tell a story during each game, and I'm always grateful for that, because I think there's so much going on besides the hockey game too.
Well, thank you for that, Skip. Now, up above me and behind me is the guy who was really the one who sort of propelled me to this career, listening to Harry Carey as a kid in Western Illinois. And when I could hear Harry Carey, Jack Buck, Joe Garagiola working in the booth, and I was like in grade school at the time, and could hear how much fun they were having. That's when I decided I was going to try to point myself toward this career, because they got paid to do it.
I want to thank Pete Weber for sitting in with me. I really enjoy talking to him, and I hope I have a chance to follow up with him. When we end these things, I always have another question or two I want to ask him. I didn't mean to put him on the spot on a couple of them earlier, but it was great to have him. And I want to call out David Nipper. That's my nephew. He's the producer of these episodes. He's also a wonderful songwriter and singer. And he actually produced Sulphurdale Sunset for me as the intro and exit for the podcast episodes. As always, I'm grateful that you listen in. If you have ideas that you'd like to shoot my way, feel free to send me an email at 262downright@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.